we're a couple weeks away still. Everybody's holiday season is starting to get a little chaotic at all. Kind of, you guys are kind of hitting the end of the semester. You guys ready for your finals and everything? Oh, yikes! All right, yeah.
I think we should make finals a new band word.
Oh, yeah, nice, nice. We'll find a new word for it. Don't worry. All right, sweet. So it's once again week two. Next week will be our last week of our Christmas series. And tonight we are talking about how Jesus became one of us. And so throughout this series, last week, if you weren't here, if you kind of missed it, we started out by talking the Christmas story didn't start in a manger. Okay? The Christmas story didn't begin as soon as Jesus was born. We talked about all of the prophecies in the Old Testament. 600 to 800, up to 1,000 years before Jesus was born, there were prophets who they received messages from God and they relayed them to people, and they were telling everybody, hey, we're looking for a Messiah, and this is what you look for, and all these different things. And throughout multiple different verses that we talked about last week, we saw that starting in Genesis, we saw it point towards the birth of Jesus. So the whole Bible really is what we are celebrating at Christmas time. I mean, it all points to this, and then the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. So for this week's sake, once again, we were just talking about how Jesus became one of us. But before we dive into that, is it fair to say that AI is just pretty normal for you guys at this point? Okay. All right, Kylie, Miss Powell, close your eyes. Raise your hand if you used AI this week at school. Sweet. Sweet. Guess what? I used it too. All right, I used it too. Yep. Listen. Yep. All right, listen. Okay. So here's the thing. Here's the deal. I remember I was subbing. I was long term subbing for Mrs. Powell, and somebody in one of my classes said, Pastor Ryan, you had to have used ChatGPT when you were in high school. And I was just like, I wish. That would have been cool. Okay. Here's the thing. AI used to be stuff of like science fiction. Okay. And we talk about robots. You think of like C3PO or R2D2 for you Star Wars guys out there. Or like if you're really into some cool movies, what about Terminator? Okay. But now AI is not fiction anymore. It's not something that we just talk about or think about. It's something that you guys have all used this week. I've used it this week. Used responsibly. It can be a good tool depending on what you're trying to do. I get that. Some of you guys probably use AI without even realizing it because you've just gotten so used to it. And just today I used ChatGPT to do something, and I don't even remember what it was, but it's become a part of my life, like just kind of using it for certain things. It's just the way it goes. ChatGPT makes some good graphics sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes they do. All right, so depending on what you're doing, it can be good, it can be bad, it can be helpful, maybe it's not. But the fact of the matter is AI has changed how we live. AI has changed how we learn, and it's changed how we create things. It's reshaping a ton of different industries around the world. And so, before AI, for people born in the 80s and 90s, the big game changer would be the internet. Right? When the internet came out, you could do a lot more. If you go 100 years earlier, it's the phone, like a telephone. And that changed a lot of things because, it could take weeks or months to send a letter across the United States, right? So those, when people who were around when the telephone was invented, guess what? They could just call instead of write letters. It's great. So, and then we had the internet. You could email people. Social media came along later on. And now we're kind of here. What seems like the game changer for our generation here is AI, right? That's the kind of thing that, if you don't know the answer to something, what do? ChatGPT. Yeah. All right. Google. Man. You guys are crazy. Yeah, some sort of AI. Okay. And so, as big as those things are, as big moments as those are for us, of course, the biggest game changing moment for all of us here, all of us in history, is when, 2,000 years ago, in some tiny Middle Eastern town, Jesus was born in a manger, right? This is a big deal for us, and this is what we're here to celebrate and talk about. And so, Chaotic Christmas is all about this. The moment that God became one of us, right? If God actually stepped into our world, we don't have to guess what he's like anymore. Okay? We have that example in Jesus. Okay, so before Jesus, they would always wonder, what would it look like for God to be on earth? Now that Jesus was already here on earth, we see these things. But back in this time, people had caught glimpses of God before in small different ways. Whether it's through his power in creation, whether it was God's faithfulness to his people, whether it was through miracles that were seen. Based on those experiences, they thought they had God all figured out. Right? That was as close as they would get to, experiencing God, to being next to God. But then we see that Jesus shows up, and he didn't look like anything like they expected. We kind of talked about that last week. The Israelites were looking for, a great commander, a great military leader to, kick the teeth in on these other countries, and so they could live in peace. And we know that that's not what happened. But Jesus is the true source of peace. So in a weird roundabout way, they got what they wanted, but in a different scale. And so if you missed that last week, you can go back and watch it. But this week, we just talked about Jesus is exactly what we needed. Okay, and so does anybody know what incarnation means? I know it's a big fancy word here. Don't worry.
I know it.
I got you. Don't worry. Nice. Okay, so there's an important theological word that means Jesus showed up. Incarnation. Okay, so incarnation means Jesus, who is fully God, took on a human body and lived a human life. Okay? God became one of us. So we're gonna read John chapter 1. For those of you guys that are waiting for me to say that, because I forgot to say something earlier. Turn to John chapter 1, that's where we're gonna be. So if you go to the New Testament, it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. All right. And just the very first chapter there. John 1, 1 through 5, and then we'll read verse 14 also.
So before Jesus was born, was December 25th just like a regular old day?
Yeah, they're just like, yep, it's cold. For them, it's Middle East. I don't know what the weather is like. Probably is, I don't know. Wasn't there. You'll have to wait till you get to heaven and ask. Be like, what happened on December 25th before Jesus? And they'll be like, I don't know. Good question. John chapter 1. It'll be up on the screen for you. I'll go ahead and read it real fast. It says, in the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. And then if we jump down to verse 14 here, it says, so the Word became human, and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. Okay, so John referred to Jesus as the Word several times, and this is kind of what it reveals. Okay, so the first thing is when we speak, our words and thoughts are accessible to the people around us. Okay, so when you say something, people hear it. People will go and say things. If they heard you say something, they'll say, this person said this, right? It's fully accessible to the people around. And that's exactly what Jesus does. Okay, Jesus makes God accessible. So we talk about Jesus, this Christmas story, we often talk about Jesus starts in a manger. And John tells us that Jesus was there in the beginning. Okay? So before there were galaxies, before history was being written, before anything just was, Jesus was both with God and was God. And not only that, also through him, everything was created. Okay? Your breath, your DNA, the stars in the sky, the earth we are on today, of course, it was all created through Jesus. And then in verse 14, it says the Word became human. Okay? So the God that made everything became one of us. Right? He got a body. He got hungry. He got tired. He was thirsty. He laughed until his side hurt. Right? He cried. He got his heart broken. He's been betrayed. He's experienced joy. The creator of the world, the creator of the universe, the creator of everything became one of us. Just take that in for a minute, right? Like, why would, we'll kind of talk about this a little bit later, but why would God leave such a perfect place where there's no sin, where he's being worshiped 24/7? Why would he leave that place to meet us here on earth? A place where he would be betrayed, a place where people wouldn't accept him, a place where a lot of people choose not to worship him. And it's because God is full of unfailing love and faithfulness. Okay? That's a love that doesn't fail. It's a love that doesn't give up. And it shows up when you least deserve it and when you most need it. So our first point tonight is Jesus has always been God. We got to address this first. Jesus didn't just become God along the way. There was already God before there was even a before. Okay? God has been around for eternity. Okay, and Jesus is God. He's not some add-on to God. He's not just another good teacher. He's not somebody you could just take part of what he says and leave the rest. It's kind of all or nothing. Okay, and so Jesus is God himself. Jesus is all-powerful. Jesus is all-knowing. Jesus is greater than anything we could ever imagine, and that means he is worthy of our worship. Okay. Second thing, now that we kind of addressed that a little bit, Jesus is God. He's always been God. Second thing is that Jesus became one of us. So if we look back to the first part there of John 1:14, it says, so the Word became human and made his home among us. Okay. Have you guys ever felt misunderstood? Have you guys ever felt, sad? Have you guys ever had friends ghost you? Nice. There we got some people real honest there. Have you ever been so drained that you just kind of wanted to crawl away from everybody and just be away? It's because there's so much going on. Jesus gets that because he also experienced it. Okay? But why? Once again, we're getting to that point now where we're going to talk about it. But why would Jesus do that? Love doesn't watch from the sidelines. Okay? What's more convincing? Okay, say you're going through a hard time. Say, a family member passes away, or you get broken up with, or you're just having a rough time, and somebody texts you and says, hey, hope you're doing okay. Does that feel okay? Yeah. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that, Does it mean more when somebody shows up to your door with your favorite food and says, hey, we're going to get through this? Okay. Right, we all have those kinds of stories. I had a friend, I remember I just got out of a bad relationship, and I just remember being so just down. And the first time I've really ever experienced this, where everything clicked, is we were driving around one night, and he was like, "Hey, man, obviously I'm here for you. I got you. You're in a pretty deep hole right now, and here's what I'm gonna do." He's like, "I'm gonna get down in there with you, and I'm gonna help you dig your way out." Right, and this is that same kind of love that Jesus is giving here. And that's the beauty of, remember this word of incarnation, right? God didn't just send a message. God could have easily had a prophet relay a message saying, hey, this is what God said. God says he loves you. God says he's here for you. God didn't just send a message, he sent himself. And because God showed up, when you cry out in frustration or when you're heartbroken, you're not talking to a God who says, I can imagine what that feels like. You're talking to one that says, I know, and I've been there. So I'm going to help you get through it. Right? Jesus here on earth, right, as a human, he experienced the exact same things that we do. Right? He had friends that betrayed him. He got tired. People talked bad about him. Any experience that we can think of, like Jesus went through that. And through all those things, our third point tonight is Jesus brought his light into our darkness. John doesn't just tell us that Jesus became human, he tells us why. John 1:4, the Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. Okay, darkness is kind of disorienting. Okay, and here's what I mean by that. When all the lights are off in your house, and you need a drink of water, but you don't want to turn the lights on because your mom or dad are going to wake up and be mad. What do you try to do? You just let the lights stay off. You sneak through the best that you can. And you probably do a pretty good job, right? Because you kind of know your house. But you always stub your toe. You always do. It never fails, right? No matter how well you know your house, your brother or sister left a toy on the floor and you tripped over it. Or you stubbed your toe on the table or on the corner, right? Even when you're in a familiar place, when there's no light, right, we have a hard time. But as soon as we get the tiniest bit of light, right, even if it's just, coming from under a door or, for me, it was always the microwave light in my house. I'm like, if I could see that, I kind of know where I'm at. Whenever we have the smallest amount of light, things start to make a little more sense. Right? You can kind of figure out where you're at. But then there's nothing compared to when you actually find the light switch and you're able to turn it on. Right? Because then you could see everything around you. Right? So when Jesus became human, it was like we flipped on a light switch in a room that was completely dark, that didn't even have windows. But because before Jesus, humanity was trying to figure out these questions of who is God really? How can we know God? What does God want from us? Now, these are questions that humanity wrestled with because, they had things like the law and they had prophets, but Jesus physically, or God in the form of Jesus, hadn't been here yet. So they had a lot more questions than we do. And so when Jesus showed up, people could finally see that God wasn't some distant, impersonal deity, but instead, he's a caring creator who loves us so much that he wanted to bring life to our broken world. Right? Why did God come down from a perfect environment, a perfect place? Because he wanted to bring life to our imperfect world and to our broken world. Okay, so when life starts to feel overwhelming, you're not stumbling around in the dark hoping to find an exit. Right? You can walk with the light himself in Jesus. So a couple action points this week. What are we going to do to live this out? What does this look like in our lives, right? First one is make a point to remember who Jesus really is. Okay? All of this story, anything we talk about Christmas here, it all starts with who is Jesus to you. Right? If we're able to recognize Jesus as God himself in human flesh, as the Lord and Savior of our lives, if we're able to do those things, it changes how we celebrate this season. Right? We're going to get gifts, we're going to hang out with family, but we will know that there is a bigger picture. There is a bigger story, and it's still ongoing today. And so this week, the challenge is to remember the full truth of the Christmas story. So whether you see a nativity set, or you see Christmas lights, or you hear Christmas songs, let those things be a reminder to you of the incredible truth that is that the baby in the manger is the same God who spoke galaxies into existence. That baby in the manger is the same God who created you. He knows you better than anybody else. I've had people kind of do it this way. Every time they've experienced something Christmassy, if they saw a Christmas decoration, they listened to a Christmas song, they watched a Christmas movie, whenever they see baby Jesus, any of those kinds of things, they say to themselves, that tiny baby is a big God. All right, it's so easy to watch these movies. You're like, oh, it's so sweet. Like Hallmark movies are all the same, but you still watch them. It's awesome. Oh, nice. I'm gonna head out, actually. Right. All right. Talk to your parents about that one. I don't know. But anytime you see baby Jesus, whether it's in a movie, whether it's talked about in a song, just remind yourself that that tiny baby in the movie or in the song, that tiny baby is a big God. Right? That tiny baby is the God who created you, who loves you. You can come up with your own way if you want. That's just one way I've kind of heard somebody do. But through all this, let us never forget the fact that an all-powerful God, right, the God of the universe, the creator of everything, chose to become one of us. Last thing for tonight is share the light of Jesus with someone else. Okay? Jesus didn't just come to sit in the light with you and be the light just for you. Okay? Jesus wants you to be in the light. Jesus wants you to walk with him. But he also came to be the light for everybody else. Right? And one of the best ways to understand how amazing this gift really is to share it with somebody else. Those of you guys who are followers of Christ, can you remember that moment where you decided to you made that decision? And you look at the difference between your life before and after? I hope and pray that you can see a big difference between those two. Just know that there are people that you love and care about, people that you see every day who have never been able to experience that. My challenge to you this week is to look for someone in your life that might need to experience Jesus' love through your actions. All right, we've talked about that. The best way that we can show Jesus' love and Jesus in general to people is by serving them, loving them, just as Jesus would. Okay, when Jesus became human, when he became one of us, he didn't just tell people about God's love. He showed them God's love by the way that he lived, the way that he served, the way that he cared for others. And when we do the same for other people, we are reflecting the same heart that caused God to step into our world in the first place, bringing a light to a broken world. Next week, we're going to wrap up our Christmas series at our Christmas party. And we're gonna talk about some more Christmas stuff, and I don't want to spoil it for you. But I hope and pray that between now and then, that you're able to show someone the light of Jesus, and maybe you're even able to bring them next week. Right? Christmas parties, fall parties, all those kinds of things, they're easy stuff to bring people to. And I think it'd be really cool if we were all able to share Jesus with one person.